Awesome. All right, I'm Paige, I'm an alcoholic. So glad you guys are all with us. And so where we're going to be picking up, I know I said it before, no problem saying it again, is on the very bottom paragraph of page 77. And so bottom paragraph 77, under no condition, that's where we're going to be picking up. And just a quick little bit of review. What we've been doing is we've been talking about steps 8 and 9. And we've been talking about them kind of intertwined because in my experience, they seem to be intertwined as we go through this part of the chapter into action. And so the 8-step list is about, or the 8th step is about a list. A lot of that list is going to come from our 4th step. And it's also about willingness. And we spoke about a number of ways to build willingness. One was to work with the ones we're willing to work with first, and to move in that direction. Another is to pray for willingness. I talk a lot about how it is incredibly helpful to write out the amends beforehand. One of the ones to build willingness that we left off on, and welcome those that just joined us, we're on bottom of page 77, is to send out the approach messages, bit in the teeth, go do it, dive in. And then I have fun little ways like amends roulette or, going in an amender competition. Those are not big book vetted. They're just things that I do. So those are different ways in which we have to build willingness. And now we're really going to dive into how can we functionally make the amends. So, bottom of page 77, it says, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. That's not happening at this point in time. And it's like, I will say it is something that we need to be reminded of. Welcome, Andy. We're so glad you're here. So glad you're here. Welcome. It says simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. So we're clear that hey, this is why I'm doing it. It says we are there to sweep off our side of the street. That doesn't mean I'm doing my sweeping and I'm like, hey, your street's a little dirty. We're only focusing on mine. Realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. And I'll point something out, and I'm sure we've all seen it, is this book, man, it gives us a single piece of information a number of different ways. It's like hammer home, in all these, you know what I mean? And it's like, hey, when we're making amends, how's about we don't point out where they're going wrong? And then it's like 8 different ways of saying it. Because I will just say we do need it. How often have we either been the sponsee or worked with the sponsee that goes, no time for the yeah buts. So it says we stick to our own faults. Welcome, Michelle. It's top of 78. We stick to our own. It says, if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the results. So that's giving us the deportment, or another way to say it is the posture of our heart, how we show up to these amends. Calm. I just remembered I'm supposed to talk slower at this study. So calm. And in that, that calm tone. Frank. Being frank is to be quite black and white, cut and dry about what I did, and open. And I love that idea of open as in the posture of our heart, to be open. And if I show up in that way, I will be gratified with the results. I'll be grateful. It'll work. That's how we're called to show up. And so often we talk about happy, joyous, and free. We are sure that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. I'm talking about what it talks about in the family afterwards. But I can't get to happy, joyous, and free. And this is my experience. I truly cannot get to happy, joyous, and free if I do not do my amends and start with calm, frank, and open. And so let's talk about how we can functionally make amends. And from this paragraph and some of the ones before and some of them after, there's just a way that I have found very helpful and very practical. And it's not on my share screen, which that's great, especially because I made sure I grabbed it right before and I double checked that it was available right before we did it. Hold on. There we go. Got it. And then I will put me in the corner. Ta-da! All right. So this is a helpful way of doing step 9 and breaking down the 9th step into 4 parts. So the first part is what I like to refer to as the approach. So what I got to do is, it's helpful to write out the amends beforehand. It can be helpful to write out the approach beforehand, but this is where I'm finding the person. If I have them in my contacts, I'm reaching out to them. Maybe I'm giving them a call, maybe a text, maybe a Facebook message. This is not the amends itself. This is the approach. I'm reaching out to them to see if they would be open to receiving an amends, seeing if we could book a time. And I'm explaining why am I here? What am I here to do? And I describe it in a number of ways. A helpful approach could look something like, I'm reaching out to you today because I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And part of the process of Alcoholics Anonymous asks that I look at and reflect upon my life. In so doing, it became apparent to me that I caused you harm. And I would like the opportunity, if you would allow me to make it right. Something like that. Do we have to tell them we're in AA? No, we don't have to. We could say I've been reflecting upon my life, and in so doing, it became obvious that I caused you harm. I'm hoping that you would be open to receiving an amends from me. And, I came from a school that was very big on face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball, sit down with them. But I'll share something. There was a lot of times where I'd be working with sponsees and they would have a lot of amends. Like I think of one right now who had most of her amends in another province, Saskatchewan. So it's kind of like I'm in Montana and the person's in Nebraska. I don't know, I'll throw that out there. Or maybe Dakota's a little, anyway, different state. And she was just out of prison. She was on parole. She didn't have the ability to physically go there and make the amends. And me being stuck on but we were supposed to do eyeball to eyeball, that actually was a bit of a hindrance to her and to making those amends. And when COVID happened, I'm sure I was the only one who got excited. I'm like, hey guys, if we don't have any amends that we haven't made, we can do them over Zoom. You guys, let's go. I promise you, there was not a human being that shared my enthusiasm. None of my sponsees. They're like, camera off, bye girl. We're not here for that. And so one of the things that came from that, and then there was that period of time where there was kind of the world was reopening. And some people were very wanting to be in person and meet in person, and some people weren't comfortable with that. And that period of time really kind of taught me that what I can do is I can ask for consent. So I can say in the approach, I would love to meet with you face to face if you're open to that. But if not, maybe there's another way we could do it. And that can be helpful if I end up, and I did actually, I owed an amends to somebody who moved to Australia. And thankfully she came back to Calgary for a visit, and I was able to snag her during her visit. But I'll have the funds to go to Australia. I do have the spiritual desire though. Like, I'll go. You know what I'm saying? It won't take nothing to get me on the plane. I just don't got the funds for it. So that's the approach I take. And I want you to know, if I share anything and you're like, I disagree with that, you're right. You're right. And I'm wrong. And some of you guys know, I'm like, but I have a lot of fun over here being wrong. So come and join me. So that is the first part of the amends, is actually trying to figure out booking a time, a place to make the amends. And if you guys remember when I was talking about building willingness, I was sharing my experience where I'll grab a sponsee and I'll be like, pick 10, which sounds probably insane. Pick 10 people to reach out. It's like, girl, I'm busy. I have stuff going on. 10? Listen, it's 2025. They're probably not going to get back to you right away. You got it. It's fine. Pick 10. You're in the middle of it. It'll be good. And then the second part of the amends process is where I'm sitting down with them, or we're actually in the amends itself. And here what we do is we focus on what I did. And it is important to be specific and focus on my character defects. Now, when I say specific when applicable. There are times where it's not helpful to be specific. But more often than not, what I want to do is I want to be specific and again, focus on my defects of character. Those two things are really, really important because I've worked with sponsees and I learned a lot about amends by receiving some bad ones, to be honest with you. And I don't mind receiving bad amends, but it just taught me a lot about them. And so one of the things is if I just tell you what I did this, I did this, it could almost sound a little like, experientially, it sounds a little like I'm bragging about the harms. And if I talk only, I received one where all the person did was tell me their defects of character. I could kind of figure out what they were making an amends for, but I had to ask just for clarification. So that is another thing where it's like, if I'm doing both, it really shows that I know what I did, I'm addressing the specific harms, and I'm taking accountability. Now, when we talk about the second part of step 9, where I talk about my harms, what I did, focusing on my defects of character, one of the biggest things is like, okay, where does this come from? And in my experience, if I have been fearless and thorough in my 4th column of my resentments, I can take, maybe not all of, but maybe not all of, but I can take, sorry, I just saw there's a bunch in the chat. Yes, no, you are welcome. Everyone is welcome. No worries. So, but not all of, but most of what I put in the 4th column of my resentments can go right into the 2nd column or 2nd part of step 9. And that's really cool. Like, there is a beautiful flow to this thing. If I'm being thorough and if I'm really diving in, it flows. It flows. And so do I put in all of it? No. Do I, is it helpful to put in, have I done these things? No. Is it helpful to put in the fears? Not often. But for example, now this is the quintessential sort of Paige harm. And, you guys will be very familiar with this. So, the stealing the car, sleeping with the husband and peeing on the carpet. Well, let's go make an amends for it. This is a full circle moment. Here we are. So we wouldn't be mentioning things like the husband if they didn't know. So what it would look like is when I slept with your husband, and I know it's like, girl, this is intense. But when I slept with your husband, that was incredibly dishonest. It was selfish. I was inconsiderate. I betrayed the trust that you had in me and you had in your relationship. When I stole your car, another example of where I was dishonest, I was inconsiderate of you, I was selfish. And you'll notice there's this moment where, at least for me, I might want to say, I'm sorry. And it can be, I'll let you know, it's not the end of the world if we sneak in a sorry in our amends. In fact, there are times where they do need to hear that contrition. But in my experience, what is more powerful than I was sorry is that was wrong of me. Also, you did not deserve that. That carries more weight than sorry. And as a Canadian, I'm known to sprinkle that in anywhere. You know what I mean? I'll just be existing. Sorry, So when I stole your car, that was again a betrayal of your trust. It was selfish. It was inconsiderate, and you did not deserve that. When I peed on your carpet, it was dishonest. When I just pretended I didn't do it. I also did that while I was intoxicated and as an alcoholic, and that is absolutely no excuse for that behavior. As an alcoholic, I have a responsibility to take a course of action that allows me to show up as a human being you need me to be. And I was complacent in that program of action. And as a result, I showed up to your life as an active alcoholic, and you did not deserve that. And so that's what we're talking about. I mention what I did and I tie it back to my defects of character. Now, there are some exceptions, and we'll talk about them. But one of the exceptions is I received an amends. Oh, I received an amends, and it was this little sweetie. She said, Paige, She would talk so quiet and so like mousy. So, and actually, I was on a service committee and with her, and her role at the service committee, like we assigned her this role because we were having fun with it. Her role was to tell there was a louder guy to be quiet by telling him to go F himself, because it was so funny to have this little quiet girl saying, Peter, go F yourself. It was the best. Service can be fun. But she made an amends to me. And the amends was, I shouldn't do the voice. That's not helpful. But I need to make an amends because I was really judging you. Now, I'm somebody where it's like, fair enough, that you were probably accurate in your assessment. But is that a helpful way to make amends? No, because a lot of people are going to be like, wait, for what? And feel really insecure. So I don't recommend saying, I judged you for this and this and this in an amends. I also don't find it the most helpful to go and say, I was gossiping about you, because again, that's going to create more harm. So how I have found it more effective to make amends in those ways is to mention I wasn't the friend that you needed me to be, and to be intentional about building them up to their face. And if I was talking bad about them behind their back, I definitely got to say nice things to them, to their face and behind their back. And that's when, that behavior fell away. So that's what I'm looking to do. Be specific and tie it into my defects of character. The third is ask, and I found this really helpful to ask. And how I like to phrase it like, is there any other way in which I harmed you? I like to say, though it was not my intention to leave anything out, I'm aware that there might be other ways in which I caused you harm. Or you might need to share with me how my actions made you feel. I'd like to give you the opportunity to share that with me now, to give them a voice. Because a lot of times when we cause harm, we take away their voice. And so that's something that I've found really helpful. Also, if you are wondering, like, what are my defects of character? Well, they'll tell you. To be honest though, most people are so incredibly gracious. But the most important thing about that is if I'm doing that, I need to listen. This is not where I debate. This is not where I anda. This is not where I'm setting my own boundaries. I'm listening. If I need to set boundaries with somebody, absolutely. But it's not happening here in this case. So I am listening. Because if it is true for them, it's true. And it is a window and a lens into how my actions and my behaviors affect others. And this is important. I then ask, what can I do to make it right? And annoyingly, that means I got to follow through on it. So also, if I owe money, I don't call up the IRS or the Visa or MasterCard and it's like, what can I do to make it right? I call them with some money and a payment plan. And I'll be honest with you, if I owe money, less to corporations, but actually in general, when I've owed money and had to make financial amends, I want to, and I'm going to call it Scrooge McDuck. I want to show up like Scrooge McDuck with two big bags of money, and I want to go plomp and put them on the table, paid in full. I want to do that. But there is a lot of spiritual value in having to pay back money over time. Because this might shock you, I don't have Scrooge McDuck income. I don't have a swimming pool of gold coins. I have disability money, which is not abundant. That's not what my pool's not full of that. I don't have a pool. So what do we do? Especially with family. Like if we owe money to mom and dad who have bailed us out again and again and again, there's actually tremendous value in demonstrating that change in who I am by making consistent payments. That shows and demonstrates the change. And also what I found to be really helpful is if I owe a bunch of financial amends, what I found helpful is focusing on the smallest amount owed and paying that off, and then taking that money and putting it on the next and the next and the next. And then it helps pay off those financial amends. It's just a really helpful way to sort of attack it and go after it. Another thing that I have suggested to sponsees, have people followed through on that? Not really, is if I do have certain financial amends that do have to be made in a lump sum payment for whatever reason, I can open a savings account that is only for the financial amends. Do they take me up on it? No. Is it a useful suggestion? Yes. And then I can put that money away, and then I'm not touching it. No touching. And it is there for if I do have to make that payment as a lump sum. So that's just some of my experience with financial amends. I didn't have a tremendous number of financial amends, but I did owe an amount. I had about 40 grand in student loans. And to be fair, that's not like I didn't rip them off, but that was a significant amount, especially for a degree that I have no interest in using. Fun times. I know, but that's actually, it's like that 40 grand, you know what that paid for? I can do a screen share. Yeah, you're welcome. Money well spent. But so I had to pay that back, and I would just do my best to go after it and to make the payments when I could, and as much as I possibly could. And we'll talk more about financial amends. In fact, that's the next part coming. So I'm a little ahead of myself. But here's the thing. What can I do to make it right? What can I do to make it right? And I am going to spoil the ending for you guys. Most of the time, do you know what they say? They say, this is more than enough. You just keep doing what you're doing. And I will let you know, the spiritual giant that I am, amends made, all done, got nothing I gotta do, woohoo, that's a gimme amends, gimme, made it, awesome, rock and roll. No, Paige, what that means, because what did they ask? They asked that I keep doing what I'm doing. That means to fulfill this amends, I need to continue to make my other amends. It means I need to pray on a daily basis, meditate on a daily basis, continue to take inventory, continue to set right any new mistakes as I go along, and carry this message to others. You see, this way of life becomes the amends in those cases. And I'll let you know, very rarely have I had anyone, very rarely did I ever, I'm giggling because I'm like, but I got a story. And that's the thing. Sometimes we come to AA and we want to tell war stories. I think amends stories are way more fun than war stories. Yes, we're all behind the dumpster, but like amends stories, those are fun. Oh, you know what? I'll tell you 2 amends stories. Cause yeah, let's talk about like lived experience. And so I owed an amends to, he was my best friend in junior high, best friend in high school. I fall into my alcoholism, and there was a couple of things that he really wanted me to show up for that were important to him. And I didn't show up, or I didn't show up in kind of the way that I should. Sober, attentive, you know what I'm saying? And so I reached out to him to make an amends. And I go through this process. And when we got to what can I do to make it right, I should preface this with he became the assistant pastor of a church. And I did not see this coming. Some of y'all know what's coming. I didn't see it. It was a surprise to me. And he said, well, you could come to church. And so for about a year, and I got up for, like, they would pick me up, thank goodness, at like 8 a.m. And some of you guys know I am not a morning person. And I went to Filipino Baptist Church, which I will say the food, phenomenal. And even though how they approached God and spirituality wasn't quite how I approached it, that was okay. And I got to sit and have an experience of them sharing about their experience of God. And the Filipino food was amazing. I'll reiterate that. It was a bit tricky because at the time I was still smoking cigarettes, and that was a big no-no in their religion. So I was very much the remedial kid who was like having a nicotine fit the whole time. But it was a beautiful experience, and I don't regret having done that. But I will say that is probably the most actually intense sort of amends that I ever had to make, and it was a beautiful experience. I'll share another one, and I'll be honest, I don't look good in this story, so that's part of why I'm telling this story as well, because I don't look good in it. So we were talking before the meeting about me being disabled and when that happened. And for a little context, that happened at about 18 months into my sobriety. I very suddenly lost the ability to walk without assistance. I developed very severe neurological symptoms, like the vertigo. So I would have the spinning bed, but the foot on the floor trick doesn't help with this one. You guys know the foot on the floor trick. Yeah, it didn't help. So I had chronic nausea. I had severe memory impairment. I had to learn how to read again. I was very, very, very sick, and I wasn't getting a lot of help. I was kind of left on my own to try to figure things out on my own. And I remember one day I was at my doctor's office, and I wasn't well. And when I say I wasn't well, I don't mean physically, although that wasn't good either, but I was dying spiritually. I was riddled with self-pity. I was riddled with hopelessness. I was not in a good place. And I'm known for having phones that are way too old. And my phone at the time didn't even have internet on it. Like, that's how old it was. And so my doctor at the time would do this thing where he would kind of just leave you at the waiting room for, like, an appointment would be at 2. I wouldn't get into the room until like 3:30. He wouldn't see me until 4. And so I don't have internet to fiddle around on my phone. So I was just getting a little bored looking in drawers. I didn't have any intention, but I'm like, oh, what's this? It's a speculum. Just having a good time, just looking at, not touching. But then I found something, and I found an implement, and I won't tell you what it is specifically, but I found an implement that I realized I could use to take an attempt on my life. Now, I've been sober a while. I'm not doing well. And I yoinked it. Yoinked is the technical term. Actually, stole it is the technical term. And I took it. And then, life went on. I was not well for a long time. There's more to that, but I forgot about it. And by the way, it's one of those things. Oftentimes you'll be like, I'm done my amends, and then go sit with a sponsee and talk about their amends, and then more will come up. Oh man, that's happened to me. And I can't remember how the amends, but it was on my heart. And that's how I know. And I say it's on my heart, but what I mean is in my gut. When I got the twisties and the resisties, that's how I know there's an amends there. And I was reminded about that, and I was like, oh man, I got to make amends. And you guys know I talk about that window of willingness. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I knew that window was closing. And my best friend at the time had a doctor at the same office. And so I was like, Jamie, what I need you to do is I need you to book, because Jamie would have to see their doctor regularly for medical, just because of their medication, just to check the blood work. I'm like, hey, I need you to do the blood work thing, because again, I'm so selfless. I'm roping my friend into this. You're going to have to set an appointment first thing in the morning, just as like accountability. And my friend, delightful, wonderful human being, of course. So I'm going to go and I'm going to show up, and here's my plan. I'm going to do it as soon as it opens, because it's going to be quiet and it's not going to be a scene, and I'm going to deal with it that way. And so I get there with my friend. I have never seen that doctor's office so full in my entire life. It's packed. It's like, what is everyone doing there at 7 or 8 in the morning on like a Saturday? Or maybe it was a Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like, what are you guys doing? And I'm like, okay. And so what I do is I go to the receptionist, and you'll notice that I'm trying to cut corners. Yes. And I go to the receptionist, and I do what is known as like a reasonable sort of social approach. There's some social cues, because I'm a lean and a whisper. We're picking up that this is not anything. So I'm doing a lean and a whisper, and okay. So maybe a year or so ago, I can't remember how long it was, I took this thing, and I would like to pay for it. And then, God bless the receptionist, she said, you stole a what? What was the thing that you stole? What did you take? And I'm like, no, a thing. And I, said what it was. I would like, and you stole a what? I'd like to pay for it. And I got my debit card in hand. I'm like, let me pay for it, woman. Like, please. I didn't say that, but that's what was happening on the inside. Waiting room full of people. And I'm like, let me pay for it. And she's like, I don't know what you stole. You'll have to wait for the doctor. So I had to wait for like 2 hours to go see this guy. Guy comes in, and he's like, what's up? And I'm like, hey, and again, Was it a perfect amends? Probably not, because I did tell him why I stole it. I was probably trying to garner a little sympathy. Come on, be easy on me. But I told him I stole this thing, and why, and I would like to pay for it. And he said, Paige, they're like 50 cents. Like, you can go. And so in terms of an amends, that's one of my favorite stories, because I love the ones where it's like they don't go well. You know what I mean? And because what happened as a result of this amends that maybe didn't go how I thought it should go? Well, I got free from it. I got relief from it. It's the funny story, you guys. It's good. It's a good story. That's the thing. And also, here's my experience. I have reached out to people who I owed an amends to, and I was blocked. And what does that mean? That means that's okay. I did my best. You know what I mean? It's however they go is none of my business. And even if they don't go well, it's an experience that I get to use to help another human being. So it's powerful. And I mean, it's a good story. I love the idea, me sitting in Filipino Baptist church, hanging out. I was the remedial kid. Actually, I remember one time they're like, what do you do with resentments? And I think they were expecting me to say like, punch them or something. And I'm like, I got this one. And they were like, kind of taken aback by my answer of the rigorous program of action of the columns and the, amends. And they're like, because again, I was a remedial kid. And then, me in the doctor's office, why did you steal? Oh, So it says back on top of page 78, in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. And what is expected in the amends process? Well, I expected it's going to go terribly. I stole something that was worth 50 cents. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up in the penitentiary. There's going to be a SWAT team that's going to come and get me. You know what I mean? And I'm going to get incarcerated for this 50-cent thing. Or I'm going to make amends to my mother, who I have a lovely relationship with, and all of a sudden, she's going to call the cops. I haven't even done a crime. You know what I mean? My assumption is that this is going to go badly. And 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. What is unexpected is that it goes well. It goes well. That's what's unexpected. It goes well. And that has been my experience. I've had amends that maybe didn't go the way I wanted. And I've worked with sponsees where there were amends that maybe didn't go the way they wanted. But at the end of the day, I've never regretted a spiritual action taken in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've never had a sponsee that regretted a spiritual action or an amends, even if it wasn't well received. And kind of here's the thing. If they're going to tell you to F off, they're probably going to tell you that in the approach message. They're not likely to go and sit down with you at a coffee shop and just to tell you to F off. That's a whole lot of effort. So if they're sitting with you, it's probably going to go okay. Just to allay any and all fears. So sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Years of bitterness and anger and hostility, and it's gone in one conversation. That is the power of amends. Rarely, it would be rare, do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Rarely is progress made on amends. And actually, I wanted to say something as well, because I'm big on writing amends out before we go and do it. I think it's helpful to bring, because again, we all know what it's like right before an amends. And again, if you have any digestive problems, you can either drink the coffee at your local meeting, that'll get it moving, or go make the amends you don't want to make. Oh, that'll clear you right out, I'm surprised Dr. Smith, by Dr. Smith, I mean Dr. Bob, Dr. Robert Holbrook Smith, our co-founder. He was a colorectal surgeon, a proctologist by trade. I'm surprised he didn't ask his patients to go make amends before going in. That would have gotten them all prepped up for surgery. Whoa, you get a little nervy. But in my experience, because it can be so nerve-wracking, it can be helpful to have the amends written out and so that I can have it with me. You don't have to read it as a script, but it's helpful to have. And I know the argument or the like, oh, but people are going to think it's not from the heart. And what I encourage is us to communicate. That's what I was talking about a lot last week. We can communicate. If I'm reaching out to an ex who's in a relationship, I can communicate. I know that you're in a relationship. I'm not trying to cause any problems or reopen things. I'm just trying to provide the opportunity to make things right, perhaps some healing and some closure. Communicate. So what I can do is if I need to bring the amends written out, which, by the way, is a beautiful way to build willingness, writing it out. As soon as we kind of know what we're saying, man, it's wild how I'm willing to go do it. But I can say, I want you to know, I've written this and put this on paper, not because it's not from my heart, but because this amends is important to me. And I don't want to leave anything out. I don't want to forget anything. And that's a good way to acknowledge what they might be feeling, to acknowledge the piece of paper, and to offer reasonable communication, So that's how I approach it. So rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. It would be rare for us to not at least make some sort of progress. Sometimes people be like, no, I'm not interested. But even that is progress. And it says, rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. So sometimes the same person that was like, man, we thought they were out to get us, it changes them and it changes how we see them. There's a lot of times I got to make the amends to truly let go of the resentment. Oh, that's a pain in the butt. Also, there's a lot of times I got to make the amends to get free of the defective character. I often hear, oh, but I don't, if I'm still acting out on that defect, I can't make that amends. It's like, no, that's what got me to stop doing a whole lot of stuff I shouldn't have been doing, is making amends for it. So that's my experience. And it changes the hearts of people. And we're going to talk about amends with partners, people that we're in relationship with, family members. And if we are frustrated that we have a family member or a spouse or a partner or whatever that is not acting how we think they should, we know, us telling them how they should act, that does nothing. Because it doesn't work when they tell us what we ought to do. I'm leaving my socks where I put them. That toilet seat is going to be whatever position I think is right, regardless of what you think about it. You know what I mean? But when I show up and I acknowledge what I did wrong, and my defects of character, sometimes there's that feeling they need to change. But it's important for me to understand that I'm the one with the tools. And if I have the tools, it is my responsibility to use them. And if I show up and I make an amends, they probably don't know how to do it. Anyone here intuitively know how to do that 4-step thing that I just put on the screen? No, that's not intuitive. Admitting I'm wrong, not intuitive, That's not how I show up to life. And I get to demonstrate that. And if I'm like, they never admit that they're wrong, they're not going to admit it if I point it out. But if I show where I'm wrong, they might change. They might not, but they have a better chance. So occasionally they will offer assistance. Now, I haven't done this, but there's a local gentleman that was talking to one of my sponsees, and he pointed out something cool. And you can be like, girl, this is not cool. This sounds like way more work. You're stressing me out. Got the twisties and the resisties. But you can also ask, is there anyone else that you think I owe an amends to? Oh, when I heard that, it's like, I know the mixed bag of facial reactions. I love it. I was like, ooh, because I talk about that. If the world was to write my 8-step list, it might be different than what I got on paper. So I just heard of that. I haven't done that, but I thought I'd share it with you as a fun little add-on. And I know some of you are like, girl, I am so over this. Alrighty. So occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter if someone does throw us out of his office or blocks us on Facebook or doesn't want to hear from us or tells us we suck and hangs up when we make the approach. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. It's gone. It's gone. We've done our part. If they don't want to hear it, that's okay. That's okay. And if it is somebody like family, or it's still on our heart, we can always check back in a year, 6 months or a year later and just say like, hey, I just wanted to see if things have changed and you've been open to receiving an amends. If not, I fully understand and I will respect that, if it's on our heart. But it's water over the dam. It's water over the dam. So now is when we transition into specific types of an amends, or of amends that we can make. And one of the things that I want to point out is if we find ourselves relating to some of these categories, so we're going to look at money, we're going to look at criminal offenses, we're going to look at relationships, starting specifically with infidelity, and then in broader, if there is no infidelity, and just romantic relationships in general. And if you're like, I relate to some of those, what I want you to know is it was a lot of effort for the early members of AA to scrounge together enough money to print this book. They were writing, selling shares in the early days, and people were buying, and they were trying to, scrape enough money. They're not wasting paper on things that are not applicable. We don't have I spent too much time at the carnival and I really love the tilt-a-whirl section of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. That doesn't apply. Or that I've been doing a little bit too much crocheting. And by the way, no judgment if you enjoy the tilt-a-whirl or a crochet. No judgment. But what I am saying is if you relate to something that is described in these amends, guess what? It's because we have done it. It's so applicable to so many of us. That's why we're talking about it. So you are not alone. And we have a way to move through it. And we have a way to make it right. So most alcoholics owe money. Darn it. Ugh, accurate. So we're talking about financial amends. Oh, man. And it says, we do not dodge our creditors. That is a direction. And if you're wondering, what does dodging our creditors look like? Well, this was a number of years ago, many, many years ago. I was at my home group, and it was before the meeting started, and a gentleman answered, we were in conversation. He's like, oh, 1 second. He answers his phone, and he says, Boston Pizza Chinook, how can I help you? And then like the person hangs up, and I was like, what? Because I know he's a person. He's not Boston Pizza Chinook. He's not a restaurant. And he's like, oh, creditors. That is an example of dodging our creditors. So we don't do that. We don't pretend we're a pizza place. We deal with it. And this is what it says. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. I know this is going to be a surprise, but people who have access to our financial situation, if they're able to see liquor store purchase, ATM withdrawal, liquor store purchase, they can figure out what was happening. If you go to the bank, and there's a thing, I don't know if it's called the same thing everywhere else in the world, but it's where it's kind of check, where it's like you put a blank envelope into the ATM and you say, yeah, it was a check for $100. And it gives you the $100 and there's no check. I'm not trying to give you guys ideas. Some of you are like, ooh, no, not giving ideas. But hey, if you got $100 kited check, they can figure out what we're up to. It's not a surprise, So it's just helpful to be honest. That listen, I'm an alcoholic and I'm currently working a program of recovery. And then what we're going to see is that we are going to make the best deal we can with them. So it says, nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. There's no value to that, because I'm living in fear. And this isn't my experience, but when I was with my ex, and he's never gotten sober, been in and out. But when we were together, he was about to go into another rehab. and he owed a significant amount of money on Visa, and he called up Visa. Now, Visa is probably not known as being like little Miss Humanitarian. It's not a mom and pop sort of business. It's Visa. And he calls up Visa, and he didn't have this instruction. He just I don't know, did whatever seemed to come naturally to him. And he explained that he was an alcoholic and that he was trying to go to rehab, and they paused his payments and his interest. And I was astounded that happened. Like, I'm as shocked as you are. And so that advice is coming from like, man, let's just be honest. Let's just, And so it says, approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. I was surprised that that's how Visa approached it, Arranging, now this is important, arranging the best deal we can. We let these people know we are sorry. Now that sorry happens after we've arranged a deal to pay them back, and that we are paying them back. It's not a calling up Visa and saying, my bad, okay, bye. No, we arrange the best deal we can. But that's important too. We are not to be the martyr that is going to like drown myself in financial debt. Figure out what can we afford on a monthly basis and offer that. Different places in the world have different laws in regards to creditors. So there are some places where if you make a reasonable offer, they can't refuse it. Sometimes there's little loopholes that you might have to look through to make sure you can access that deal. Sometimes you have to look at things like a consumer proposal, or, where you need financial assistance to, like, and what I mean is a professional to help figure out how to navigate some of these difficult financial things. I have a sponsee, and she was drowning in payday loan debt. Drowning in it. And like that payday loan debt, it is like, the interest is insane. And so, and her and I were talking, and I'm like, listen, I know you guys know I budget based on vibes. So we got my limitations. And so I encouraged her to reach out to a charity that sort of helps with figuring out these sorts of things. And they gave her really helpful and solid advice. And to be honest, the advice that they offered was like, ask your family to borrow the money from them, to pay it off and then pay them back. And we spoke about it because she wasn't feeling like that was a good idea. And it's like, do we have any other way? And so we did that, and she got out of that debt, and she's been paying her parents off. And she had been sober a number of years when she was working with me. But yeah, we are not there to drown ourselves, to be financial martyrs. And again, it can be helpful to start with the smallest debt that I owe, and then it builds momentum. And we can pay it off. And by the way, I did pay off that 40 grand in student loan debt, which I should have had a cake or something, but I'm not really good at doing that. And apparently I'm just having a little sweet tooth moment because I just want cake right now is what that is. I'll just celebrate paying it off a couple of years ago. Where's my cake? Alrighty. So we arrange the best deal we can. We let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. And this is a must. I know you guys know, I joke, it's like, ooh, it's a little musty in here. We must lose our fear of creditors, no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. So that's a warning. We're not going to get it all tackled at once. And when I was speaking in Step 8, one of the things that it can be really helpful to do is to get an estimate of how much I owe. So when I'm writing out my 8-step list, if I'm like, I owe Judy $50 and I owe Eileen $300 and I owe Visa $600, to make a little note about that. Michelle, I owe you in Australian. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's Australian currency. Which, by the way, I don't know what the conversion rate is for that. So one of the things that is really helpful with that is to make a list of what I owe, and then to see, because if you guys are like me, when I owe money, it builds. That number in my mind, it builds, and it becomes more and more overwhelming. But when I can see it on paper, it helps take some of that fear out of it. It helps me to see what it really is. Because when it's in here, it's like all over the place. But when I see it on paper, okay, this is what I owe. Now we can begin to go after some of these financial amends. So we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. So I don't have to handle it all perfectly, but I've got to at least begin to come up with a plan. And if I need help with that, that's okay. There's also a lot of people in AA who have experience with financial amends, and we can ask for help. So this is type 2, or not type 2, well, type of amends 2, the second type of an amends that we might owe. It says, perhaps we have committed a criminal offense. Uh-oh, we broke the law. Now, I won't ask for a show of hands. We'll keep that one on the down low. But I will say, and I genuinely, I'm not somebody who other than that, the thing that I stole, I never really was like much of a shoplifter, which I'll be honest with you, seems to be weird. Because most alcoholics, I won't say most, but many alcoholics get sober and then start getting sticky fingers in early sobriety. We make amends. And so here's my experience when I've been working with people who owe amends for things like shoplifting. It can be really helpful to go. I do think it's best to go to the store, but sometimes you just got to work with somebody's level of willingness. They're like, I will call the store. But to call them at least and to speak to a manager and explain the situation to make that direct amends. And the part of why that is so important, one is it says to make direct amends wherever possible. But if I try to only make an indirect amends, I've seen this happen a number of times where we make an attempt at an indirect amends and we hear about it in the meetings and it starts to just sit in our gut and it starts to feel like, oh, I don't know if I did the right thing. Then we got to make the direct amends anyways. And they might not care that I've already donated some money. You know what I mean? They might want the whole amount. So I'm just trying to help you out financially. So a lot of the times it is really helpful to make that direct amends. And I know if it's not one of those things where I have the ability to make the direct amends. So if it's not one of those things where it's like, I'm able to do it in that sort of like perfect way, a phone call is better than nothing. And one of the things is I go and I explain that I'm sober, I'm in AA, and I owe an amends. And so what do we do? So what we do is I explain what I'm there to do. And then I say, what can I do to make it right? Just like I would the traditional process, right? And in that, I'll tell you, I shouldn't spoil the ending. I should allow you to have the dignity of your own experience. But what I will say is that 9 times out of 10, they can't take the money anyways. Like, especially if you stole from like a big box store, they can't take the money anyways. So what will they have asked to do? 9 times out of 10, donate that amount of money to their charity. And that's literally been my experience time and time and time again. So, all right. So that's what I found to be really helpful and really effective. So it says perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. Perhaps it's only a petty, we may be short on our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done this sort of thing. So things like, do I, stealing from work, stealing from, that sort of deal. You know what I'm saying? That's the sort of vibe. And if we've done that, if we've stolen from work, if we've committed petty offenses, if we've shoplifted, if we've stolen, oh man, I've got some people I've worked with. When you go into a liquor store and they have like the board of shame, the board of shame where there are pictures on there. It's like, oh, they stole. It says most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That is a common form of trouble too. Now, I'm aware of the time, so where we're going to, oopsies, I took out the wrong bookmark. Where we're going to pick up next week, I know it's just a little disaster over here. Where we're going to pick up next week is we're going to dive into, okay, we've set the stage. We owe these tremendous amends, or they feel like these tremendous amends. I've broken the law. How can I make it right? And we're going to be given direction on how we can build willingness. And so we'll leave it there.